All right. Well, we are continuing uh, our series on the mission of God for the family. We've been talking about the three spheres of the garden and of the land and of the wilderness, and we are moving now from the garden to the land, or from home to the sphere of work, the sphere of uh, transformation, the sphere of gathering resources, the sphere of the 6 days of labor. And the what we've seen is that labor, the metaphor system, or the metaphor that God sets up for labor, is gardening, right? That God established the Garden of Eden, and He made it to grow up, and Adam watched, and then Eve was added to the mission to become the gardener that God put on display, right? So God starts the gardening in order to show Adam how to do it, but then he says, "You're my image. You're the one taking over and finishing this job of gardening the rest of the world." And he's told to begin by going out to the land of Havilah, and there's gold there, there's jewels, there's resources, there's all of these different things that he's going to go get, and he's going to come back and use them to garden and glorify the Garden of Eden, as well as the Garden of Eve. And then Eve is going to be joining, or in Genesis, Eve is joining the mission, as well as in Titus and Timothy and Song of Solomon and different places where this is discussed. It's and assumed really is that Eve is going to be uh, a part of the dominion, the transformational mandate of gardening the world. And since Adam is given multiple jobs, and some that he literally can't do without Eve, multiply, and others that he can't do without her wisdom, but he's also given um, multiple spheres to do it in. And then you have Titus calling Eve the ruler of the home, or calling women the ruler of the home, right? That you've got the dominion mandate within multiple spheres takes multiple people. It's all given to Adam as his responsibility to accomplish, but he needs Eve to come along with him. He needs to woo her into the mission, and for her to submit, which means come under his mission, to take on his mission as her own. He needs that because he can't do this job on his own. It's an impossible job on his own. And so his first job is to get onto the mission that God has him on, to guard and garden the world. His next job is to woo Eve into that mission with him, right? The it is Women tend to be very mission oriented in the way that God created them, and so it's hard for them to be brought into a new family, in marriage, to a man that doesn't really have a mission, right? That's and so I tell young men often, if you would like to get married, which you should, uh, one of the most important things to do is be on mission, be about the mission that God has for you, and because that will put you into contact with the young ladies that are looking to be on a mission as well. But it helps you to know what kind of woman to look for, because you know what your mission is, right? If you know that God is calling you, for example, into international missions, then you need to find the kind of woman that has the that can meet the health requirements. Just for example, like if you have when I was young, I was considering international missions, and then I met the woman that I knew I wanted to marry. Well, uh, she didn't have a thyroid gland, so she has to take a replacement every day. I knew right then, if I was going to go, if my mission was going to be international missions, then I couldn't marry her because she had no thyroid gland. I couldn't put her in a situation where she needed a pill every day. And then be in a place where that couldn't be. I couldn't provide that, right? I couldn't be out in sub-Saharan Africa, uh, where there's you can't get the medicine that my wife needs, right? That would be irresponsible of me. But I knew that um, by marrying her, that was off the table, and that's the sort of thing that you should know, um you should think about when looking for somebody. Now, it's very clear also that there's something deeply mysterious about falling in love that is a good thing that God designed. Solomon, the wisest man ever, even says it's one of the great mysteries. The way of a man with a maid is one of the great mysteries. How does that work? I have no idea. So it's not something that you just manufacture or say, "Oh, hey, I'm mail order bride. This here's my list of things that I'm putting in an order for." But at the same time, there's a real those decisions have real consequences. If you the woman you marry um, should take should end up affecting what mission you believe you're on, because what mission she can and can't help you with is a part of the package. That's how God calls us. That's how God makes it clear what our mission is. But it's also something that we should be keeping in mind, because the marriage itself has a purpose. The marriage itself has a transform the world purpose. And so if that's not on our mind when we're making decisions about who to marry, then we're not thinking biblically about it. Um, but it isn't. But there is a really important aspect to the mystery of falling in love that is biblical. So I'm not saying that's not a part of it, but we should be thinking clearly about these sorts of things as well. So but the mission of the land has to do with going out to the land, gathering the resources, and bringing them home, and transforming and gardening and protecting the home, and then broadening your sphere of protective authority to the places out in the land, uh, and broadening your fear of transformational influence on the world that God made. And so that's what a job is about. So whether or not you are a plumber, or whether you are uh, a um, I've had jobs everywhere from cleaning toilets in the middle of the night in offices, in doctors' offices, you know, to working in factories, to being a pastor, to being a teacher. I've had jobs washing dishes. I've had jobs um, delivering groceries. I've had all kinds of different jobs. I've had jobs in the film and television industry. I've had jobs where I was the president, and I've had jobs where was the janitor. And in every one of those situations, the mission is the same. Whatever God has given you authority over, how do you turn it into a place that is a better reflection of the garden of God that is coming at the end of time, right? That is the job, right? We know that a garden city is the end of this place. How do we, by faith, take that garden city that is God's promised end and bring it into the present in my sphere of influence in my job? I remember I was a brand new Christian. I was working my first job besides I had started a lawn mowing company in junior high, and had grown that. And so throughout high school, that's what I did. I was grateful to have a dad who was an entrepreneur who was encouraging and helped me get my first lawnmower. He helped me, um, you know, helped me get the tools I needed to do that. And then let me borrow his truck, when he drove me to places when I was young, when I couldn't drive. Uh, yeah, we used to pull lawnmower around behind a bike when I before I could drive. But then my dad also would drive me places when I'd get a job far away. He was very supportive. I'm really grateful for that. At the time, didn't realize how important that was, but he was, you know, out here teaching me, teaching me what it looks like to be an entrepreneur. Well, my first job that I had, then I became a Christian late in high school. My first job I had after I had graduated high school, working for somebody else, was a job washing dishes at the spaghetti factory. And I remember going in there and just thinking like, I'm just here to punch a clock, because it gave me a little bit of money to go, make it to the punk rock shows I wanted to watch, and get out to the live music, because that was my at the time that was my life goal, was to become a working musician. And so I you went to watch a lot of music and go play a lot of music, and it was what, and so I was there working because it could buy me the pieces of my drum set that I needed, buy me the new guitar that I wanted, that sort of thing. But I remember very distinctly, we hired a new guy, who came in, and he looked around and he said, we could improve how we do dishes. And I said, I don't see why we would need to. This is working fine. He's like, yeah, but look, we could do this faster. And he reorganized, and he said, we talked to the manager, then he reorganized and he set up a whole system that really did significantly improve how quickly we could do dishes, and we stopped ever getting behind. And I, I remember thinking, I don't think that way. I don't think that way about my job. This guy, um, was he was thinking about his job in a Christian way. I, as a new Christian, wasn't, and I was convicted that, I don't know if he was a Christian or not, but I was convicted that this guy was thinking more Christian than me. And I think about him regularly. He took washing dishes as an opportunity to improve the world. And I think that's the way that we want to think. We want to help our kids think that there's a joy, that comes from a good, hard day's work, right? From the exhaustion at the end of the day. And I actually really like the phrase bringing home the bacon, because the the idea is of going out and getting the things that your family needs and bringing it home is a deeply biblical way to think about work. You providing the resources that, your family needs to have a good home, a good meal, but also, um, the going out and, thinking transformatively about anything you do. Often when we start talking about this, we look at the, thou shalt not steal, and we have discussions about private property, right? Which is true. The Bible 100% supports private property. We talk about the need for generosity, which is true, and I'm going to actually, want to spend a whole session of the podcast talking about that. But I think at the beginning of it is thinking in terms of the transformational authority that God gives us in the world, whether it's small, whether it's large, whatever it is that God gives us. How do we think transformationally about it? How do we leave this thing better, than we find it? Um, and that a big part of the inheritance that we leave our children isn't just financial, it's how to think about economics. How do we think biblically about, the opportunity to, be God's representative on the earth, to be the priests and the kings that God has set up, that we use our authority so that the world reflects, God's reality better, or God's intentions for the world, that it reflects that more thoroughly because we got involved, with our labor. So, and for me, that the under thinking about how we're gardeners and garders, we guard and garden this world, is a really helpful metaphor, because that, we go out and we become, better gardeners, or we're raising gardeners and becoming better gardeners in the garden at home, right? That's what the discipline is about. That's what the time together is about. That's what all the formational education is about. That's what, that's whether we're, it's taking a Latin class or learning the math or reading literature, whatever it is. It should be transforming us into better equipped transformers of the world, better equipped gardeners of the world. And gardens are something that are fruitful beyond just the one generation, right? If you, I love the scene in in Prince Caspian when the children come back to Narnia and they begin to recognize that they're at Cair Paravel because of the apples, right? That the apples that were planted generations ago have spread, right? That the garden couldn't be overcome, even though the bricks fell down, the stones fell down, that the roof was gone, but the garden couldn't be overcome, and so they begin to recognize that they are back in Narnia, that they're at Cair Paravel because of the apples. It's such a beautiful scene. And when we think multi-generationally, when we think long term, when we think how do I then we can look at whatever the thing God gives us to do, we can throw our hearts into it. And Titus 2, um, Paul, talking to the pastor, Titus, says, exhort servants to be obedient to their own masters and to please them well in all things, not talking back, not purloining or stealing, not showing, but showing faithfulness, that they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in all things, right? So we have this opportunity when we're working to adorn the doctrine of God in all things, right? To adorn the transformational power of Jesus's death and resurrection on the cross by being transformed into people that transform the world, right? By God is gardening us so that we can garden the world. And that gardening of the world proves out that Jesus is the great gardener of hearts, right? That Jesus is the great gardener of his people, that Jesus' garden, that Jesus is a good gardener of his Eve, right? A good gardener of his garden, which is the church, right? Which is his people. Jesus is and when the fruitfulness of our labor is proven over time, then that adorns the doctrine, it adorns what we say about God, right? So thinking that way about work has been very helpful and transformational for me, because work isn't the thing you have to get through to get to the good stuff anymore, right? Work 6 days, rest one, becomes good news, not because just because of the rest, but because you also get to be working when you think about this opportunity. So there we go. That's the first of our series, Mission of God for the Family, talking about the land. We're going to talk some more about generosity and talk some more about what that looks like in detail with tomorrow.